the truth is that was one of the hardest things I ever did. But that moment of just saying yes to God opened the door to being able to do it for tens of thousands of people with no like filter or anything like that. So that was really the beginning of that story. And there's more. I could tell you more stories about how God healed people. But really, it was saying yes to that opened up the door to, I've had atheists come to my events. My events are business events and leadership events where I teach people how to ask God questions and get answers and then use those answers to recode their neurology for success. I literally teach people how to train their brain using what God says. Mm-hmm. And I have had atheists walk into my events and have a conversation with God. It's unbelievable.
How do you do that? How do you lead an atheist to have a conversation with God?
I don't know how. So let me tell you a story about a woman named Maya. So Maya shows up on the second day of my event. I'm leading people through this exercise where they're asking God about themselves. She shows up, she walks in the door, and she's standing there. And all of a sudden, I start saying, okay, you're going to ask God the first question, then you're going to ask God the second question. And she's standing over near the door. This is a woman who for 40 years has been an avowed atheist. If you knew her story, which I eventually found out, from age 5 until age 17, she was sexually abused by her dad. And at 17, she said, clearly there's no God. Because if my father was such a jerk, why would I ever believe in a heavenly one? And so she cut the ties, didn't want to talk to God, because clearly either he didn't exist or he hated her. And so she went, anyone in that situation, it could be addiction, abuse, it could be anything. She just went to drive. She became one of the nation's most successful lawyers. She was a big wave surfer in her 60s. She was a ski instructor up in Tahoe. Like everything was going for this woman except for one thing. She walks in the door of my event and I'm like, hey, you're going to ask God some questions about you. Mm. And every instinct she had in her body was like, run out the door, go. But to her credit, she walks in, sits down, takes out a journal and asks the questions. 45 minutes later on a break, she came up to me with her 2 pages of notes. She said, Ed, I have a question for you. I'm an atheist, and I have 2 pages of notes from God. How does that work? So to answer your question, I said to her, I don't know how that works. You're the atheist.
Yeah.
You explain it to me, right?
Yeah.
So for 2 years, this woman, Maya, every Friday, she would wake up for an hour every Friday and spend an hour talking to God. Technically, she still called herself an atheist. And I said, you pray more than most Christians I know. Like an hour a week is pretty solid, right. And eventually God begins to just touch her heart and father her and begins to undo some wounds. And the next thing you know, she's standing on my stage. She had never told this story. The story that I knew about her father, she had never told that story to anyone except for me and her husband, the 2 people in the world, only ones that do that. Next thing you know, she's standing up on a stage. She's telling that story. Mm. Oh, you could hear a pin drop. And the fascinating thing is like for every story you hear, there's 10 that tried to play it cool, tried to hide. And there's other people in the room that have that same story that have never told anyone either. And it might not have been dad, it might have been mom, it could have been an uncle, it could have been a teacher that said something to them, it could have been someone who said, what money doesn't grow on trees, it could have been someone who said, you'll never amount to anything. It could have been the mentor that they had who left them and they didn't know why the person left them. Everyone ends up with a couple arrows stuck inside of them, and she starts telling her story, and next thing you know, people start getting fixed and healed. And not only their mindsets start getting healed, I've had in business events, literally, I've had people healed physically of issues and diseases in certain cases without us even praying for them. It's literally, incredible. Someone tells a story, their mindset snaps, and because their mindset shifts, the body just follows completely right behind it. It's unbelievable the gift that God's given us in our ability to affect our body and our mind and our future and our destiny simply because of the way we think. Yeah. And my mission is to get God's people on their purpose, connected to Him with no restraint, with nothing holding back. Most people I know, this is true for most leaders too, by the way, I'm just speaking very directly, most leaders are about 5% clear on where God's taking them. And dude, if you could just get to 70%, you'd be unstoppable. You don't even need to get to 100%. So that clarity and that understanding is one of the things that I help people see, because when you see that, you will stop at nothing. You will stop at nothing to allow that to happen in your life. So it's just been a fun journey.
It's beautiful.